Okay, welcome to Switch Your Sitch with your host, Katie Turner. Extremely excited today because it is a journey that I have thought about, not one that I currently partake in, but I have Kirsten Chalmers here, and Kirsten has switched her sitch on in a couple of different areas. The first one being countries. She's from South Africa. Secondly, did start in psychology, moved into the corporate world, was doing HR, and then went back when she had her children to do clinical psychology and her master's, because as we discussed, being a mum is just not enough. We like to throw other things on our plates. So, and then she's now started a business called Point Zero Sellers, which goes into the space of non-alcoholic drinks, but creating an experience around them. So it is accepted, it is sexy, but more so around mindful drinking. So I'm going to pass it over to you. Thank you so much for your time today, Kirsten.
Oh, that's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
And so can you give us a little bit of background? Firstly, you moved here from South Africa. So tell us that switch that you made and why you came to Australia in the first place.
Gosh, that's going back. So yes, about 20 odd years. My husband and I were sort of recently married, and of course, looking at the world, looking at South Africa, and it's not a pretty environment back there. And I had happened to come and visit my uncle in Australia on a trip when I celebrated finishing uni. And I fell in love with the country. And luckily enough, I met someone who also loved Australia and had been. And so we decided we had nothing to lose. We had no children. We should just get on a boat and, well, not literally, of course, and do it. And of course, actually, that's the first time. So my husband brought in his business. So we started a business from scratch on his side. And I, carried the load, working in HR. Because it takes time to start a business. So the idea was the first 5 years I will stick in corporate and keep things going and then see how his business goes. And then it's my turn after, which I did take. I did take my turn.
I love that. And what was his business?
So he still imports disinfectants into the country. Funny enough, I know disinfectant sounds huge at the moment, like we had some kind of inside. No inside whatsoever. This was actually for animals. It's a really safe disinfectant to use on animal paws and things like that. So it's worked really, really well. We're still running that business, and happy with that. This is just me now doing something different.
In the corporate, we discussed this because when I first left university, my first graduateship was with a investment bank here in Sydney. And I worked in that for 2 years, and then I left to go and pursue another career. Worked out that finance really wasn't my game. My boss said exactly the same thing. So I knew I was making the right decision. But that corporate culture that I experienced it only for 2 years, and then I went into actually training the likes of Accenture, Logica, Gartner. But you lived and breathed that corporate culture for quite some time. Can you give us a little bit of insight into that?
So funny you mentioned Accenture, because of course that's one of the companies I worked for, both in South Africa and then later here too, and Deloitte's. And it was in the HR world. So finished my degree, my undergraduate, did my honors in psychology, didn't feel ready to get into psychology, decided to, see what was next. What do you do with a psychology degree? Well, maybe HR. So I checked out HR, absolutely loved it, did a lot of recruiting, a lot of training. It started climbing the corporate ladder. I think I had my first management role at 23, and I very quickly learned that booze was part of the scene. So that particular company was, Friday nights. It was a catering company, funnily enough. That wasn't in the Accenture space. It was prior to Accenture. It was a catering company, and of course catering, oh my gosh, you celebrate. So every Friday it was drinks at the company bar, and if you weren't there, you didn't really have a career. So I made it my thing to be at the company bar on a Friday afternoon. Definitely.
Yeah, I think, it was all tax deductible back then as well, right? So, it was huge. I know even and I was doing corporate training, in-house wellness training.
Yeah.
And I was invited to their Friday night drinks or, at Christmas parties, a couple of them. And it did really center around that boozy, tax deductible
Absolutely.
entertainment.
Yeah, if someone liked you, and that's where you had access to all management, because normally you'd do your little thing in your little office and, do your, play your game. But at the end of the day, if you wanted to meet the CEO, you stood next to him at the bar. How else would you do it? You weren't going to knock on his door when he was busy on a Thursday afternoon. You'd wait for Friday drinks.
That's right. Yeah. And it was luckily probably no social media back then either.
Correct. The Christmas parties would have been a doozy.
Yes, exactly. I think we probably wouldn't have all had jobs after those Friday night drinks. So
no, that's right. I'm very grateful that I live in these times without having gone through all that.
Me too, exactly. And so then you left there, you had two children?
Yeah, so started off in corporate overseas. Decided to immigrate. Didn't really make any big changes because obviously hubby was doing his thing. So integrated into Australia here. Loved it from the first 6 months we were here. Did the whole working in Melbourne. Loved the city life of Melbourne. It's just vibrant compared to South Africa, where you don't tend to the big businesses weren't all in the city. I know it sounds strange to hear, but we were sort of outside the city. So to get involved in the whole city thing, started to travel to Singapore, China, got to go on the Great Wall of China on a business trip, of course. And go get my Singapore sling at raffles, the whole deal. Loved it. Lots of hours involved though. And when it came time to kids, I really had to think about whether I was going to continue to play that game. Because again, the booze was there. So, evenings, you had to be part of it. And I started to slow down a bit and started to think, do I want to do that with kids? Because I'd be an absent mum. There's no chance I could have done both. So that's when I decided to go to Melbourne Uni and do an education and developmental psychologist degree, which meant that you focus on kids, so autism, ADHD, depression, anxiety, of course, because I thought I'm going to have kids, so I want to know all about that stuff. I want to sort of immerse myself in that world. I think I do things not by halves.
Yeah, I can definitely say that. Kids studying, masters at that. So can I ask you, because I know there's been a lot more diagnosis with ADHD, autism, etc. From a clinical point of view, is it that there's just a lot more awareness around it, or is it our environment? What are your thoughts there?
Well, that's a hard one. I think we're certainly more aware. We certainly diagnose earlier. I don't know that I love diagnosing. I've often said, ask yourself why you're diagnosing before you go ahead and diagnose yourself or your children, because my only concern with diagnosing is that you carry that tag then with you forever. It's almost like you feel like, from your this high to this high, I'm ADHD and therefore I have a few deficits. And I think my anxiety has carried me well. So I do suffer from anxiety. So I push myself. So I don't think just you sort of need to hold yourself back by your diagnoses. You should say, okay, well, if I have anxiety, maybe I have a bit of ADHD too, because I'm into another business. Are these bad things for me? Not yet. So do I want to diagnose it and say this is a problem? Not for me. So it depends what you want to do it for. But certainly, yeah, the numbers seem higher. I do wonder whether it's the foods we, eat and, what we do health-wise. I do wonder whether we don't exercise enough and these contribute to, for example, depression or sort of other mental health problems. But yeah, I think it's good that we're at least talking about it, whether we put a label on it or not.
Yeah, I think that's it. My theory, and when I understand all of this is I really think that channeling that anxiety or whatever in the right ways,
correct,
can bring about amazing outcomes. I know that I also suffer from anxiety, and exercise is a huge, huge part of every day for me. And
yes.
I think that the lack of exercise, the sitting on technology, all of that is a contributor that's not even being talked about, or perhaps even the way in which we learn. I'm a big believer. I'm not a blog writer. I'm not, but I know that I'm good on video. I can't sit still. My paperwork sucks.
Yep. Oh, yes. Yeah. And I think the thing sorry, I've just lost my microphone for a sec. The thing to think about there is, Oh, I've lost my train of thought.
Just playing to your strengths. I think
There we go.
I can
Yeah.
do that now. I know what my strengths are, and luckily enough, I've built businesses around that. I have to be stuck in an office for 40 hours a week under 9 to 5 conditions doing a job I hate or I'm not good
Yeah.
at.
Yes, and so I think knowing who you are is so powerful. And just you talk about exercise. Good on you. I'm terrible with that. I wish I was better because I absolutely know you're right. But same deal with drinking. I got to the point where I could no longer say. Ask, if someone said, oh, they, really stressed, or I can't cope with their kids, or, hubby's driving them crazy, or, just generally overworked, tired, can't sleep. I could not stop myself from saying, well, how is alcohol playing into that? Just as you would ask, how is exercise playing into that? You can't help yourself after a while saying, well, we can talk mental health, but what are the things that you're doing that are contributing to it, that without that, you may not have a mental health concern? Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that it's also about habits, right? Because exercise,
Absolutely.
I know I've had it in my life. I joined the gym when I was 16 because I understood how important it was to my mental health, like, controlling the anxiety, being able to focus. Once I got rid of the physical energy, I could focus the mental energy. And
Yes.
if I don't have that, then the exercise, I know everything just goes haywire. And it's the same as alcohol for a lot of people. Being able to make that, cut from the habit and feeling knowing what it feels like without it, I think that's
Yeah.
the biggest relief.
Absolutely. And I think people, they try and they do 30 days. And I think 30 days is great, but I feel like shaking them and going, honey, you've done the worst part. You've done the hardest part. Why are you stopping now? It's a bit like you saying, when someone does 30 days of exercise and then they go, oh, well, that was fun. You're like, you've just got your muscles into it. You've just got it started. What are you doing? Don't stop here. And I guess that's kind of my message too, is that, I love all the challenges, dry July, but make it part of your life, make it part of something, like, as you would say, just make it part of your world. We don't all have to be good all the time. I mean, God forbid, I don't want anyone to not do their thing, but maybe just not as much as we have been. And certainly with COVID, boredom, why not have a drink and then you can sort of forget the afternoon. And I really think that when you wake up in the morning and you consider what it does to your sleep, what it does to the same chemicals that we're talking about for depression, serotonin, dopamine, all those chemicals, you're messing with those. Don't pop an antidepressant and then have a swig of wine. It's not going to work.
Exactly. And I think that instant gratification is where what they're looking for, right? And the glass of wine, the scotch at the end of the day, whatever it is. Or I have clients who do the whole week, Monday to Friday, no alcohol. And then on Friday and Saturday nights, they drink as much as I would in a month. So I think
binge drinking at its best. Yeah. And look, most of us would say, we're fine because we're all heavy drinkers. I mean, I was a heavy drinker, and look, I'm taking a year off. That's what I've committed to. And I would find it hard pressed for me to go back. I wouldn't go back to the levels I was drinking, but I was certainly knocking back 4 glasses of wine a night. That wasn't that hard. So, I think that's high level drinking, but we don't think it is, or we don't say it is because everyone else is doing it. The difference was when I decided to stop, to just feel the difference for yourself. And I should have known better. I'm a psychologist, but I just, that's the point. That, I think, was what was so amazing to me, and probably why I decided to make the next switch was, life is so much better. What am I doing? And everyone should be trying this. Like, I couldn't help myself.
So what was the initial what were the initial stages that you went through? Was there a withdrawal? Was it instantly feeling better when you woke up?
Hell no, sweetheart. No, it wasn't instant. And I had, the classic sort of 5 o'clock, really loud wine, person, like in my head, like, you really deserve it, and look how tough your day is. And then, 3 days in, well, you've done 3 days, like, that's pretty good, like, why don't you just have one now? And I really had to switch that off, because and that's probably why I decided on a year. Again, I don't do things in halves, it would seem. So 3 months didn't seem like enough. I really wanted to, as you mentioned, habits, how important habits are. I wanted it to be a habit. And so the first 30 days were tricky. The next 30 days were much better. So I would say after 60 days, I felt like 45 days, I felt a hit of, wow, I feel great. This is crazy. I'm awake. It's 6 a.m. and I woke up naturally. What's with that? I do not wake up at 6 a.m. naturally. So the first couple of months, I would say, were the hardest. And then you start to get into a routine. And then the interesting change for me was change of season. So I was, this would have been, Christmas Day, I gave up. So summer, and I was on to non-alcoholic beer, because I'm not a beer drinker. So it actually felt like alcohol to me. Yeah. And so I'd swig it really slowly, probably have one non-alcoholic beer the whole night, sort of thing. But then I got to winter, and of course my brain, boom, Kirsten, it's cold. You need a nice glass of red to warm up, and look, you've done how many months already? I'd forgotten counting by that stage. And that was when I had to go, here we go. What am I going to do? What is my next habit? And so my next habit now is actually mulled wine. So I like warm, hot wine, like a spicy wine. So I've got these beautiful glass tea pots, and they actually sit at the bar. They don't sit in the kitchen. And I pour my non-alcoholic wine in there, and I've actually got a lemon tree, so I've cut and dried some lemons, and a bit of cinnamon goes in there, and maybe a clove, depending what I feel like, maybe, all sorts of things. So I played around with that, and now that's my go-to. So at 4:30 or 5 o'clock, when I'm about to make dinner, which is a massive trigger, now I just get to my teapot, switch it on, it warms to a nice 80 degrees, and then it cools down to 55. Funny how you suddenly know these stupid temperatures, because now it's important, right? Anyway, and so I found switching, now I feel comfortable summer or winter. So I feel like I've got my alternative summer or winter. And I think I'm not in an alcohol-free household, so my husband drinks. Mm-hmm. And so I can't be that kind of person that has no alcohol. So I just happen to have my bottle, and he happens to have his bottle. Mine is alcohol-free, but I feel like I'm part of the team. I feel like I'm drinking my wine, and I know for many in this field who find it harder to stop, that's a massive trigger. So maybe not for them. Yes. But if you're pretty much the average but heavy drinker, I reckon the switch is pretty easy to do.
And what about your peers? Like when you first initially decided to give up, because we are, especially in Australia, it is very centered around food, and Melbourne more so than anywhere else in Australia, food and alcohol as a sharing experience.
Yes. And I think that's exactly why I decided 0.0 had to happen, because I suddenly got super frustrated going to restaurants and having to look at the kiddie menu for my drink at fancy restaurants. We're not talking about, McDonald's. We're talking about really nice restaurants with no option. I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is crazy. It's not, I don't want to drink a cocktail all the time or a mocktail. It's too sweet. I actually want the flavor of a wine, or I want to celebrate with a champagne when someone's celebrating something. I just need it in a different bottle. And I'm prepared to pay for it. I'm not sort of wanting to have the cheap option. I don't want my Coke in my thick glass with a straw. Like, I've never drunk like that. I'm not starting now. So that's, I guess, when I started to go, no, this needs to change. I need to be able to be anywhere, any place, and still very easily, without even a second thought, have my non-alcoholic version. People shouldn't even be asking me what's in my glass. They'll just go, hey, cheers, Kirsten. Great. Have a nice evening.
I love that, because we talked offline about, I remember when I was pregnant and I'd go to an occasion or a celebration, and back then I can't even remember the name of it, but it was something you buy in Coles, and it tasted like crap, and it was full of sugar, like carbonated red sugar something, and there was as many calories in there as there was in a glass of Coke, so I may as well have been drinking just straight soft drink. But Absolutely. 0.0, really, we're talking about it now, is a wine that has had the alcohol taken out. Is that right?
Yeah. So we import from South Africa because I'm South African. So obviously my first port of call is I know these wines. I know what the actual wineries are like. So let me see if I can source some de-alcoholized there. I battle with that word too, by the way. And it's funny, but anyway, so I gave it a go, and yeah, so they've actually on my website, I've got a really cute little video on how the alcohol is actually removed. So we do prefer choosing alcohols that are removed because in my palate anyway, I can taste the difference between that and I guess a grape juice. I still can taste the flavors of I don't know, the process of making a wine. And this particular brand I loved because it's one glass of wine. No, sorry, one glass of orange juice has the same calories of 10 of my almost 0 glasses of wine. So honestly, if you're gonna pick a wine, it's beautiful, something like 71 calories per 100. And so yeah, for me, that makes a big difference. And as you say, that was important to me. I didn't want to water down my wine with a soda because you lose the flavor. It's all about the flavor. The Sexy AF is also low on calorie and stands up in the glass against all the other flavors you put in. So it's not something that, you would do without. It's got a really, really sexy brand. It's branded actually for clubs and pubs. And that's my market now. I want to be everywhere. Like you say, if you've been on a health kick, or if you're the DD, or if you're pregnant, or for religious reasons, I don't really care. But why should you not have a decent adult drink available?
I love this. I really do, because it is having options, whether you're the designated driver. For religious aspects, I hadn't even thought about. But yeah, why else, especially in Australia, we live in such a beautiful multicultural society, that is part of our makeup. So a couple of things have brought you to this stage. COVID, let's talk about that with your clinical psychology. Obviously, we know that you've decided to do the alcohol-free for a while, and this is a problem you're solving, really. You're solving your own problem, which is what businesses are drawn from.
Yeah, that's right. So look, I loved my work and I would not have stopped if it hadn't been for COVID. So it's kind of funny that this has fallen my way. But what I didn't enjoy was that it wasn't face-to-face. I am very interactive. I work with kids, right? I mean, I think we mentioned you've got a kid, you know what it's like. Can you imagine me talking to them now on the screen and trying to keep her engaged for like an hour? Forget about it, right? Especially when you're talking about depression and anxiety. Who wants to talk about this heavy stuff? So I was, in my office, I had a little therapy dog called Nugget, and he was really, part of the team. And so we could talk about some really heavy stuff without having to really feel like we're talking about it. In fact, there was very little eye contact. So, you and I are maintaining as much eye contact as we can on screen. Well, kids don't want that. They don't want a psychologist staring at them. It's bloody intimidating, right? So we played games like anger games and social games. What do you do in a social situation? And so, so many. I had an office full of stuff that I'd accumulated, and to suddenly have that taken away, I just felt like I was working without an arm. And so I just literally thought, I'll take 6 months off. Like, it'll all go away. Didn't we all think COVID was going to go away? Like, was I the only one?
Last year it was 2 weeks, a month max.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's not going to happen. It's fine. We'll get back into it. So I was like, you know what? Great time to take a breather, maybe refresh my skills. That's when I decided to stop the alcohol for myself. So it just kind of all worked together. And then when I'd taken the time off, and I suddenly didn't want to go back. I didn't want to preach about alcohol in the addiction space, because as you can hear me talking now, I'm not against alcohol. I think it can integrate really well. And I think when you're talking as a psychologist and you're talking to addicts, you probably can't have the same conversation.
That's right. I love that, because it's not about a substitution effect there when you're talking to addicts, is it? It's not about, it's actually talking about the underlying factors that are causing that addiction.
And it's also to say, let's get people before they become addicted. Let's give people an alternative that they can slow down their drinking, moderate their drinking. I mean, to be fair, in the past, when I moderated drinking, I felt like I was losing out. I felt like I was holding on, like, oh my God, let these 30 days please end so I can get back into it. I didn't feel like I had a life. And that makes stopping something so much harder. And of course, some people then really, different genetic backgrounds or family backgrounds, addiction can take a hold. And I think if we still have the Australian lifestyle, I'm still all over barbecues and pool parties and fun. I definitely don't want to lose any of that. But you just won't know what's in my glass. That's all.
I think, and that's great, because it is that stigma of, oh, if you're not drinking, then you must be pregnant, or you're an addict, a reform addict. That
worse, you're boring.
Yeah, you're boring. That's very, very true. And I mean, look, I get up at 4:17 every morning of the week except for Sundays. I have my 2 vodkas every night. Sometimes maybe not on a Monday. But again, my lifestyle would never allow me to be, it's not conducive to drinking too much anyway. So I have a barrier that exists there.
Yes.
It wouldn't look very good if I was...
well, you couldn't get up, could you?
I couldn't get up conducting an interview drunk, or they do see on, I think it's Jimmy Fallon, that they do drink wine during it.
Wow.
Or conducting an exercise class. But a lot of people, especially in COVID, like you're in Melbourne and chat online, I'm in Sydney, this is week 13, you're doing 200 and something days, and I suppose that you've gone the other way, but it can cause other people to go towards the alcohol, being at home, boredom.
Well, that's right. And so I think that's probably another trigger that you just reminded me why I decided to make the switch, was because I suddenly went, oh, Kirsten, you're not socializing. So what's with the I'm having a wine to socialize, wording? It's not there, right? And then I wasn't working. So Kirsten, you're not stressing. So now why are you trying to have a glass of wine? So suddenly all my, stories that I tell myself as to why it was so necessary to have a glass of wine fell away. And so I think COVID is sort of a double-edged sword, but it means that you can do things like take some time off and just be you and just go, okay, this is just between you and me, girl. Like, this is just us in the room, and you don't have to worry about making excuses to other people why you're not drinking, because they aren't there. You're not allowed to socialize. So that when you're out there and you can do it, you're ready for it, because A, if you're smart like me, you've sourced some good alternatives, so you'll never have to go without. Or B, you've got your story straight as to why you're not doing it, and you're quite comfortable in your own skin. So it's not about other people's stories. In fact, you asked earlier, why, how's the response been? And it's been interesting, because I think it reflects honestly more about what other people feel than what you're doing. So I'd have a variety of responses. One would be, what the hell? Why are you doing that? Like, I'm just not in my social environment. I'm not the person without a glass of wine. It's just not. It's weird, right? So it's like, what are you doing? That's just, and what's the point? Why would you have a glass of wine with nothing in it? Don't get it. So there was that. And then there was, I drink very moderately. So there was that justification of, well, you do what you need to do, girlfriend, but, I don't need to really look at this because I'm fine. I'm just absolutely fine, as they're swinging away and starting to get, a little more sort of light on their feet. So a couple, and then the third sort of response was, very quietly, gosh, you're brave. Like, I've been thinking about doing that. I feel like I'm drinking a bit too much, and maybe I should moderate too. So those were my 3 main sort of responses. And it was funny, because I gave up on Christmas Day. I had the luxury of kind of 7 days in doing New Year's. Can you imagine the thrill? I was super thrilled with myself for making that idea up. But anyway, I had to do it because I promised myself. Do you know what? I danced like the best of them. I was quite proud of myself. I was like, ooh, look at me. People won't even tell. Like, it was, if you can pull off a moment where you actually go, I can do this sober, and I actually believe in yourself and sort of shock yourself, that's a good moment.
And I think there's all this also, I find it really hard to stay up past 9:30 on any given event night.
Well, you're up at 4:30, babe.
I'm up at 4:30, and special events don't recognize that. If I have to go to a wedding, I still, I always have this theory that nothing good happens after midnight. So
no,
even those people who thought you were drinking on New Year's Eve and dancing, they wouldn't remember you even going home, because they probably
That's right. You do realize it's not about, no one's watching. You do actually realize that very important lesson. You just kind of go, they're all in their own space. They're not even noticing what I'm doing or what I'm not doing. It's really fascinating. And so it's more about, can I have fun? And you're right, you have to retrain yourself a little bit. Like, I'm sure lots of people have a bit of social anxiety. I certainly don't walk into a party feeling great. I love the fact that I've got my little anchor, my little glass. So I still have that. Like, that's not going anywhere. But you do have to just go, you can actually, I don't know if you can do this, but I've learned to pick up on the mood. You can actually get intoxicated by the music. That's what we, as humans, we listen to music, and that whole rhythm gets us going. And you just tap into the things that now work. I mean, you would know this as a gym, working in a gym. Like, once you pump that music, people get going. Why do you need the alcohol? You'd be surprised how much you can do without.
That's a really important. I spent 6 months in Brazil, and here in Australia, I think it's such a big drinking culture, because in other cultures, it is about the dancing, and I'm a dancer. So I'm the first person, my friends know it, my husband knows it. As soon as that music starts, I'm the first person on the dance floor, and the drinking goes out the window, right? Because I'm so engrossed in the music and having fun and being with other people. And I think perhaps that here in Australia, we have this culture of, once you hit 35, you can't go to nightclubs, you're not allowed to dance, you're too old. So it becomes sitting there and drinking.
Yeah, that's right. And look, we just don't have fun. And so lots of people need to get plastered to have fun. But then how much fun do you really have? You maybe have a window of an hour before you start looking stupid, probably being stupid. And it's not actually as fun as if you can just get into it. We go to Melbourne, and Sydney too. We go to concerts and theatres and music because it works. You don't actually need the alcohol. I mean, yes, it pairs very easily, and I've done it myself, so I know. But I have learned it's absolutely not required. And it's, as long as, to me anyway, as long as I feel part of the group and feel connected. I didn't want to have the conversation, why you're not drinking, because I didn't stop, because I hated the word relapse, sober. What are some of the words I dislike? It's that whole, oh, did you have to stop? No, I didn't have to stop. So getting away from all that terminology, like this was some kind of thing I had to do, just let's not have that conversation. I'm here with my glass, you're here with yours. Cheers.
I love that. It's not even a thing. And so, a woman on a mission to change experiences, to change it. Like we talked about, things I hadn't even thought about. Things like Melbourne Cup, and I've been a culprit. I've spent a Melbourne Cup looking fabulous at the beginning of it at 10 o'clock in the morning, and then at 5:30 in the afternoon having my shoes in one and falling all over the place. But having an option there, because it doesn't have to be about the alcohol there.
How sexy would that be? Like, if you could have a couple of champagnes, fine, get started. I'm not anti that. But then you switch either to a wine or some beautiful cocktails, and it's presented in a pretty way. You still feel adult. It looks exactly the same as the other option. And you just order off the menu like everyone else. Just like vegan used to be this horrible option. No one would taste it because it's like, ew. I'm definitely not into a shitty substitute. Can I use that word?
Yes, you're allowed to swear here. That's what the best thing about a podcast.
Okay, cool. So, I'm not into lowering your standards. And that's, I guess, why I became on the mission to import it, because and not to say there's not a lot of options out there. Of course there are. But if you really want to add to the world and say, let's bring in more, or I just want to be on that, I guess, cheerleader squad saying, yep, try this. And I want to be out there saying to venues, you need this on your menu, whether it's mine or anyone else. I'm obviously going to be pushing mine because that's why I'm standing in front of you. But it's just it's a chorus of people saying the same thing. And I just wanted to join that chorus.
I think it's a great option. One of the best ever concerts I ever went to was Fleetwood Mac at Hope Estate Winery up in Hunter Valley. My favorite. And the best part about that night was, I know that I don't want to drink wine because I'll have a few glasses and I will end up like 70% of that audience did, on the grass, falling over. So we drank light beer because it was that or soft drink. So yeah, that was the only option on hand, and I ended up peeing a lot of the time. So having a non-alcoholic option.
I think from memory, I'd have to check that, but I think the beer options are higher in calories. So as a woman, I'd rather be drinking the wine for sure. Having said that, we are still looking at beers. We haven't found a good beer. We're actually sourcing overseas again, not because they're not good beers, but because there are so many good beers. And if we're going to bother with one, we want it to be we want it to be a craft beer. We want it to be really good. So I guess our angle is, not just anything, get the best in terms of calories, flavor, and taste, because you are not sacrificing anything. That's the message.
Yeah, I think that's great. And being overseas recently, well, I was in Prague and we did Amsterdam and Dubrovnik in Croatia. They have a lot of
Mm,
0% alcohol on tap beers because they have a zero point 0 driving
correct.
um,
Correct.
percentage. So that's not one beer. That's not even 0.02. That's not 0.05 here in Australia.
Yep.
You cannot have a beer. So they
Mm,
have some fantastic beers over there. So yeah,
that's right. And I think we're following, and I think it's picking up really quickly. So I think the statistics are something like we've increased by 3% in the 2020, but by 2024, it's estimated to increase by 31%. So we might be slow to start, but we're taking it on.
and you're taking that on. That's even zero sellers. So both
Yes.
your husband and I and you have your own businesses, or we're the same. I have my own business. My husband has our own businesses. Can you give us any insight or any advice to our audience who are thinking of starting a business? Having two people in the one household, that's a challenge in itself.
Look, I think it's a challenge, but it also means that you gravitate to people who say, give it a go. Like, I'm sure that's the same in your world. So first of all, my first bit of advice, hang with people with a can-do attitude, because they will inspire you, whether that's sort of business networks, online networks, I guess how I reached out to you, and anywhere, just meet similar minded people, because you don't want to talk about your business idea to someone who's just going to naysay it and say, oh, that's a bit scary, and what if you don't sell, and how's that going to work out for you? Because it's very easy to then be scared and to go back into your little hole. So because I have a husband that sort of went, yeah, I've done it, you do it, let's do it, that works, right? Of course, do your homework. Like I always study. I still study, so I maintain my degree, and I maintain studies. And I studied in the addiction space, and then of course I did my own little personal 8 months so far. It's been, I think, self study, and I read a lot. I read 12 books in the first few months, and I listened to podcasts. So immerse yourself in whatever area you are interested in, because then you also get to see the players, and you get to see who's doing what, and whether you have a space in the market. Yeah, and then just and I guess, like, let's be realistic. Financially, if you can tag team with someone like your husband, or someone that one of you takes the load of the payments for a while, so that you can start a business up. That businesses don't just start up. There is investment, certainly product based. It's very different to what I've been used to, service based. And so, yeah, you've got to do your calculations, put an end date. If it doesn't work in 2 years, that's it. You stop. You don't. So I've never had to get to that end date, luckily, but I've always had this thing. Businesses don't need a lifetime to succeed. They will succeed. And if they succeed, they'll succeed early. And then you just keep going. But if they're not succeeding, that's okay. Try something else. Don't be afraid.
I think that's great. So firstly, yeah, immerse, and it is that can do or have a crack attitude. I try to not tell my ideas or my business talk then with people who've never done it, because most of them think I'm crazy. Right, I'm starting a podcast. Oh, I'm going to create this product, or I'm going out as a business coach on my own. I've got a fitness business. They're like, how do you manage to do all of that? I'm like, I multitask really well, and I live well on stress, but surrounding myself with people who do the same, who know what those pressures are, because it's very different to talking about with somebody who does like to be employed with a safe 9 to 5 job, superannuation, holiday pay, sick pay. I've never had those. And I think
I have, but I don't think I'm employable anymore. because I do my Instagram account, and if I like certain colors, that's my brand. And if I like a certain font, it's now my font. And I don't have to check it with anyone, and I just can't anymore. I couldn't do it. So yes, talk to people, as you say, who are able to do the same, because people in work are conditioned and, like you say, they find their safety there. I don't find it safe. I think as you approach 50, you could be out there like the next person. So in terms of safety, I would say don't let that hold you back, because you're safer and you're doing your own thing.
And that's really interesting. When I did a podcast with CEO of Bridge Climb here in Sydney, he was the CEO for 18 years of Bridge Climb.
Wow.
They lost the tender, and in 3 months, him and 1,100 staff were made redundant. And one thing he said to me, I always thought that I was in control of my income, and I was a lot safer than you are, being an entrepreneur for 20 years and earning my own income, but I wasn't. And the other thing he'd say to me is, you're unemployable. And I said, yes, I am. Working for
okay.
For 20 years, I am definitely not employable unless it's under a contract that I tell them what it is. So
yeah,
I love that. So surround yourself, people, educate yourself. There's so many platforms we can do that right now. Never before, like when we were at university, it was going to the university library, borrowing the books, encyclopedias back in the day. Now it's on everywhere. You can find information about anything, podcasts, YouTube, any online platform. So
become obsessed
and have an exit strategy. That's really important as well. And don't be emotionally tied to a business. I think that's one thing that I had a business that failed, and that's okay. Again, I had an exit strategy 2 and a bit years into it, and it was an online, it was like the TripAdvisor for fitness businesses. So and my biggest mistake there was I asked my friends and family about their opinions, and as they were going to be my customers, and built a platform that they were never going to use. So but I learn though, right? I learned so much about the startup online space. I was immersed myself in it. But I did, as soon as, I remember it was the 22nd of December, and I just cut it off and moved on and wasn't emotionally tied into that business. So I think that's a really important part. So where can our listeners find you? What are all your platforms, website?
Yeah. So I'm, got the website. So that's www.pointzerosellers.com.au. Everything else, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, is all at Point Zero Sellers, and as sellers as in the wine cellar, as opposed to selling with an S. So it's with a C. Please.
It's retail and wholesale.
That's right. So retail, is order online, and then there's a wholesale page for anyone who's interested, and they just get in contact with me, and we talk about wholesale prices based on volume.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know you must be crazy busy trying to get into places, because, you have no end date. We hopefully here on the 25th of October will be out for a non-alcoholic.
No, I think they're talking 5th of November. We have hope.
Right.
Let's hope.
Is that the Tuesday before Melbourne Cup? Or?
I know, right? I want to be there with my non-alcoholic spirits.
Yes, I think that's an amazing opportunity you have there. So
yeah.
Thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
It's been great. Thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you.